New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee. I'm Charles Bursell. This is The Log. Politics, culture, media criticism from a social anarchist, abolitionist perspective. Left off last time we spoke talking about this sort of shift we're entering here into the new campaign season. It's going to be a whole year now. From now until November. They're going to fall back on the domestic issues that they just love. Closing the border. They'll brag how they did that. They always tie that with crime. They lie about how immigrants are criminals. And then they'll also continue with their lies about the economy. Which, if you're still falling for those, holy cow. I mean, how many times can we fall for the same lies? Not only the same lies repeated by the regime over the last 2 years of the campaign and then the first year of the administration, but all 4 years of the first administration. And let's go back. How far are we now removed from voodoo economics, from the original lies of trickle-down theory? 45 years? Is that where? 30? Yeah, that is 45 years. Good Lord. Hard to believe that some people have been telling the same lie for that long, and even harder to believe that so many people have fallen for that lie for so long. So, yeah, the shift has begun. You're going to hear a lot more rhetoric. You're going to hear a lot more lies on the things they think will win your vote. Crime, illegal immigration, and most of all, the economy. And it's just going to be all lies. Now, here's what's keeping me up at night. Here's what I'm worried about. The Democrats, that damn Democratic Party, they're going to win. They're going to win the midterms. They're going to win every other off-year election, special election. The Republican Party under MAGA is just imploding. Now, we should be happy about that, right? Well, yeah, but the Democrats are put in the position that they have to root for a bad economy. Because right now, as I said, they're winning solely by the catastrophic failure of MAGA. And I'm just certain that they're not going to learn anything, any of the lessons of the last several years. They're going to learn nothing. The same old neoliberal corporate capitalist system will be revived yet again, one more time. The capital D Democrats are going to come back in to save this awful, awful system. 1 step forward and 10 steps back. Because they're not going to reverse the damage created by MAGA. And there's been plenty. They'll make a whole lot of promises. They'll win elections. And then they'll sit there in the Oval Office. They'll sit there in Congress and get nothing done. And we'll be right there back on the same old road that brought us to fascism in the first place. And it's already begun. I mean, the Democrats are just giddy. They won the Democratic mayor's office in Miami for the first time in 3 decades. They're so excited. This winning is going to make them confident. It's going to make them less likely to listen to reason from those of us on the left flank. They're happy for all the wrong reasons. And I'm really worried about it. They flipped a seat in the state legislature in Georgia from Republican to Democrat. This, of course, on the heels of the couple of governor's races they won, and, of course, the big win in New York City for Mamdani. Now, there is what they call themselves the Fight Club, but then they broke the first rule and they talked about it. They're calling themselves the Fight Club. It's an informal group of so-called liberal Senate Democrats. These labels are always very difficult. Let's instead call them the do-nothings and the do-somethings. Okay? The do-nothings would be represented by people like Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. The do-somethings are the Bernie side of politics. So the Fight Club, they're the do-somethings. And they're organizing to push back on the leadership and to push back on the campaign arm of the party over candidate recruitment. Now, we here on the log have been encouraging anyone within the sound of my voice to please run for Congress as a Democrat, as an independent, as a social anarchist, as a socialist. I don't care how you want to label yourself, but I want you to run in the Democratic primary and challenge every single member of Congress. Except, well, maybe even including, I'll leave that up to you. The so-called Fight Club members are Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, and Chris Murphy of Connecticut. Van Hollen and Murphy have, the two Chris's, they have had some pretty impressive rhetoric, but of course that's not always enough. Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota, and then some others not named here in the article I'm looking at, but here. Ed Markey, Jeff Merkley. Yeah, we got the two Chris's and Markey and Merkley. I get Markey and Merkley mixed up for obvious reasons. Markey is from Massachusetts, Merkley from Oregon, and Martin Heinrich of New Mexico. Anyway, they're being open and vocal about opposing Democratic Party leadership, and that's good. Now, in this fight, you've probably already been hearing about, and you're going to hear more as this campaign year moves along here. It just pains me to even hear those words come out of my mouth. We're going to have a whole year of this. Oh, God. You're going to hear about the fight in the Democratic Party between the centrists, or the establishment, and then the Bernie wing, the Fight Club wing, the Zoran Mamdani wing. And it's not going to be an honest reflection of what should be the debate. For me, it's the do something wing versus the do nothing wing. If you're just going to rely on the implosion of MAGA to win elections, if you're just going to make promises with no real solutions proposed, if you're going to put all your eggs in the basket of maintaining institutions, you are just setting yourself up for failure. Yes, you're going to win, but only because MAGA has failed so miserably. And then they're going to take those wins and interpret them 180 degrees wrong. They're going to think that means, the voters love us. We must be on the right track. Centrism is the answer. No. What people don't understand about Zoran Mamdani and Bernie Sanders, or what too many people don't understand, is that they're eminently practical. You know how much I love the sewer socialists of Milwaukee and Wisconsin. That's what Bernie is. That's what Zoran Mamdani is. They're not ideologues. They are pragmatists. They're the closest things we have to political science because they do what works. It's a scientific approach. They don't favor public investment because it's left ideologically. They favor it because it works. Everything the sewer socialists did, and then how they influenced FDR and the federal government and the New Deal, Social Security, unemployment insurance, publicly owned and run utilities, water treatment, even city-owned nonprofit grocery stores, which Zoran Mamdani is proposing, and what Daniel Hone successfully established in Milwaukee almost 100 years ago. None of this is ideological. It's just policy that works. And then there's also this. I've got some rules here for candidates. Stop telling me what the problems are. I want solutions. Don't tell me it's all about affordability. That's a buzzword. Don't tell me you favor good jobs. Everybody favors good jobs. Don't tell me that you're going to fight for excellent schools. Well, of course you're going to fight for excellent schools. Tell me how you're going to do it. Tell me the policy. Oh, but you can't do that in 30-second ads. You know what? Find a way. We got to get past just whining about the problems. Also, don't just rail against your opponents. You can You can include that in your stump speech. You can tell us how bad they are, but, we all know it. So yeah, don't just proclaim good schools or affordable health care, lower cost of living, high-paying jobs. State the problem precisely. Take a second to define the cause. That's a little bit of analysis. Why are people having a hard time finding jobs? You got a 30-second ad or a 10-minute interview on a media outlet or a half-hour stump speech? Fine, I understand they're different formats. But find a way to get in these 3 points. State the problem. Give us some analysis. Yeah, high-paying jobs? Well, because CEOs are getting 1,000 times the rate of their workers. That's why we can't have high-paying jobs. Because half the jobs out there are bullshit jobs. They're only there to serve the economy, not to serve people. Because automation, AI, robotics, we don't need as many workers, so there are more workers than jobs. Yeah, a little bit of analysis. Tell us why you think the problem is what it is. And then I want some solutions. Don't just tell me you're for high-paying jobs. Tell me how you're going to do it. And I don't want to get stuck on that one example, but give me some policy. Well, working families having a tough time? How about free childcare? Well, how are you going to pay for that? I don't know. How about a 1% tax on billionaires? I'm not here to go down every detail. I'm asking you to please give us something we can hold on to. And don't do it sometimes. Do it always. Of course, yes, sometimes you have to be brief. That's not an excuse. You still have to touch all 3 bases. State the problem clearly. Give me a little bit of analysis. Define the cause of that problem. And then propose specific solutions. You can still be brief, but you got to hit those 3 points. I'm getting so tired of this grandiose, I'm for the American people BS. We have to demand this from all of our candidates. And for that point, we have to demand it from the media we choose. All right, let me just quickly go through a few other things I've been thinking about. Oh, got to mention this. I saw an article, Associated Press. Here's the headline. When formal systems stop working, neighbors turn to each other in what many call, quote, mutual aid, end quote. Yeah, they put mutual aid in quotation marks. When formal systems stop working, neighbors turn to each other in what many call mutual aid. As though they're just now discovering mutual aid. And I guess that's true. I guess a lot of people, even the AP, are just now learning the term. Well, that's sad. It's kind of funny. It's also just a little bit heartening that finally, a mainstream legacy press outlet is writing an article about mutual aid. Yeah, they're talking about it as though it's something odd or some kind of novelty. But for God's sakes, at least they mentioned it. So maybe that's some hope. I'll read you the first few lines. It opens with a quote. Times are tough. We take care of us. In early November, Kashish Ali posted those words to her Instagram story as part of a years-long practice she's had to fundraise for food and drop it off at community fridges in Atlanta, where she's from, and now in New York, where she lives. Ali, who is 32 and first-generation Pakistani immigrant, estimated that her friends and family have trusted her with thousands of dollars over the past couple of years. So, yeah, it's not even a straight news story. It's a feature story. It's a profile. For her, it's a practice of giving back and creating connection. It's also part of a growing interest in grassroots efforts to meet community needs that many call, quote, mutual aid. As though it's some mysterious, fringe, novel, nutty idea. Often, mutual aid just comes down to neighbors helping neighbors, and as many face high prices, cuts to government programs, and political uncertainty, organizers say interest has swelled. This is just, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. The fact that they're treating the concept of mutual aid as something weird or new or fringe is just frightening to me. That we can be in a world where so many people don't understand. Now, I guess the positive spin on this, okay, we do live in that world. People don't know what mutual aid is. They have to be brought along from the very beginning. All right, I guess if that's what it takes, but oh my God. Mutual aid, as we've talked about on this program for many, many years, is an absolute, essential, primary strategy for getting out from under the thumb of not only this fascist regime, but this corporate Republican Democratic duopoly that's had no answers for us over these 45 years since the inauguration of Ronald Reagan and voodoo economics and trickle-down theory, and all of it has created a poorer and poorer working class. Until now, we've reached a point where it's working class poverty for most of us. It's yachts and champagne for some of us. And then in this shrinking middle class, more and more sort of beholden to working for and building things for that 1%. It's just such a screwed up economy, such a screwed up system. Yeah, so that's AP's reporting on what many call mutual aid. Yeah, laugh or cry. This might be a good time to share something with you. I did just a little bit of poking around to find some writers or some groups that share work on sort of practical nuts and bolts anarchist solutions. The things we favor here on the log: open borders, direct democracy, moneyless society, or at the very least, systems that rely less and less on money. Yeah, of course, I want to abolish money. I also understand that there might have to be steps along the way, but at the very least, we have to move toward taking it out of its central position. So I looked around and I found a couple things. If you have your phone out, open up your notes pad, or if you have one of your 37 pencils. And by the way, these are all on Substack. For the moment, Substack is still terrific. I don't know if and when Substack will fall prey to the enchilification of the internet. It probably will at some point, but not yet. Now, I'm not recommending any of these. These are just ones that I found that I'm only now starting to look into. One is called The Peaceful Revolutionary. The Peaceful Revolutionary explicitly argues for a stateless, classless, ownerless, moneyless world via anarchism, with a lot of emphasis on prefiguration, mutual aid, and horizontal organizing. Something called Roses and Resistance. Looks like they focus on shared decision-making, off-grid communes, things like that. Someone by the name of Margaret Killjoy, writing about what anarchism means in practice. Horizontalism. Oh, I've used that term myself. I thought I coined it. Anti-authoritarianism, grassroots decision-making. I haven't checked this one out at all. It's called Expressive Egg, but it caught my eye. A strong critique of financialized life and an emphasis on non-monetary wealth and autonomy. And I mentioned at the top the Peaceful Revolutionary. Did I? Is that the same one I mentioned earlier? Yeah. They write about mutual aid, the kind of things we talk about. Shared tool libraries, neighborhood energy co-ops, free stores, community pantries, things like that. So there you go. Do some fun holiday reading during these long, dark winter nights. We've all got to get our heads in a space where we can start to understand social anarchism and abolitionist theories regarding money, borders, states. Because, as I've said many times, we're not going back. at least not successfully. At this point, going back sounds appealing, right? Those of us who can be loosely referred to as the left, certainly anybody anti-MAGA, it might sound appealing, the idea, oh, well, we want to go back to a time before there was MAGA fascism. That's not possible. I mean, just try to wrap your head around that. Try to imagine a world, a system, where money and profits within competing nation states would provide the correct incentives for us to regain everything we've lost through MAGA fascism. In other words, it puts the world back into place, where responsible people once again take their places behind their computer screens in this vast bureaucracy to do the right thing for the American people. That members of Congress enact proper legislation to reinstall the regulations decimated, to protect our health and safety, to protect our money from those who would steal our wages and nickel and dime us to death. Yeah, there's no going back. We can't rebuild the very institutions that got us into trouble in the first place. Rebuild the very institutions that crumbled under the weight of MAGA fascism. The very institutions that allowed it to rise. The only way forward is a kind of social anarchism. And I know you're afraid of that, but you can't be. You just can't be afraid of that anymore. Now, not that there's not good news along the way. I think it's pretty important I say right now, we're not dead yet. The courts especially, they are really pulling our ass out of the fire. The Supreme Court, my God, that's got to be part of our radical readjustment here coming out the other end. We have to have serious radical reform for the Supreme Court. It should be up to maybe 18 members with term limits, just radical reform. They are gone. But the good news, again, the courts, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a federal judge, issued an order to prohibit immigration officials from detaining Abrego Garcia once again. The same judge that ordered the release just a couple days ago, making him a free man, but then had to immediately issue an order prohibiting immigration authorities from re-detaining him, because this judge feared that they might just take him into custody once again, just hours after she had ordered his release. Yeah, he had to go back into an ICE field office roughly 14 hours after he walked out of immigration detention. This was in Pennsylvania. Because, that's what ICE is doing, of course. They're laying for people who are following the law, going to their mandatory hearings to maintain their legal status, and that's where they're grabbing them. So the good news is Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a free man once again. Yeah, the courts are coming through. The National Trust is suing the regime over this ridiculous ballroom, which is really a fun little story because there's an excellent chance now that this is going to be tied up in the courts for a couple of years, and this thing is never going to be built. Because President Ocasio-Cortez or President Jon Stewart, even President Gavin Newsom, any one of them, nobody's gonna build that stupid ballroom. So there's an excellent chance that that issue is just over. That's sweet to think about, isn't it? So yeah, the courts are still working. They're keeping us alive. Not to mention this crack in the armor of the Republican Party. We got a few Republicans who've just had it. Now, as I've said 1,000 times, politicians don't do the right thing out of the goodness of their heart. They only do the right thing when they're pressured to do so, and their voters are absolutely demanding that they stand up. So there have been a couple of different discharge petitions. Of course, the most famous one was the one recently passed to get the Epstein files released. But then that kind of lit a fire under them. Hey, we don't have to wait for MAGA Grinder Johnson to authorize a vote. We can go around them with a discharge petition. And they've done that very thing. They've done that very thing on the murders of Venezuelans in their boats. Yeah, there's a discharge petition demanding the release of those videos. There's another one demanding that ACA subsidies be extended. There's yet another discharge petition making the rounds prohibiting members of Congress from trading in the stock market. There's another one to restore federal workers' union rights. So, yeah, we're not dead yet. Democracy is hanging on by its fingernails. By the way, let me just say very clearly here, these examples, these discharge petitions, this is further proof that social anarchism, democratic anarchism, is better than our current system by a wide country mile. Because if you're still having trouble with the term, just please know that when I say social anarchism, I simply mean lateral power, where money isn't ruling the day. No hierarchy, no money. Lateral political power. And the House of Representatives, when you eliminate the hierarchy of leadership, when you eliminate the dictatorial role of the orange meat puppet, the House of Representatives is the most democratic institution in our federal government. And the use of the discharge petitions is the most small d democratic tool they have. You've heard the story about the Indiana state legislature. Members threatened with primaries. Members were being swatted. They were getting ominous pizza deliveries. I saw one state rep interviewed said he had to leave his home, that he was at one location, his spouse and children were at another location because of physical threats. The state itself threatened with funding withheld, projects canceled if they didn't go along with the regime's plans for gerrymandering, for rigging the midterms. They refused. We are hanging on. Democracy, the voice of the people, is the only thing that will ever work. The further we move away from that very simple concept, the more trouble we're in. But the more we embrace that concept, the more hope we have to reverse the advance of full-blown fascism in this country. We are in the fight of our lives. It is far from over, and the winner of this battle has yet to be crowned. But we are absolutely still in this fight. And our greatest weapon is small d, lateral democracy. All right, 100 other things we could talk about. There's always a lot going on. Please be well informed, find reputable sources, and use that information to stay in the fight. This and all episodes can be heard at the website charlespurcell.com or on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Blue Sky and Substack. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio in Milwaukee. Peter Donalds wrote and performed our theme song. Okay, I love you. I'll see you out there.